"Let her go," she said, and the world shrunk. Not loud, just final. That Penrose kid, Evander, the city's golden prick, he just stared like she'd sprouted a second head. Another minute, maybe Henderson, the manager, would have grovelled enough to smooth it over. Another minute, Lily, the new girl, would have been just another statistic. But Hannah... Something snapped. See, she's got this quiet thing about her, this stubborn streak of decency that these entitled monsters never see coming. They think they own the world. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. It's not about the money, not really. It's about a reckoning, and trust me, it's going to be biblical. She thought she'd lost everything, her job, her tuition money, her ability to care for her sick mother. She prepared for a lawsuit, for financial ruin, for the end of her dreams. She never expected what came next. She never expected the father to show up. And she certainly never expected his arrival would be heralded by the thundering sound of a private helicopter, bringing an offer that would shatter her world all over again. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a billionaire. It's about what happens when unbreakable integrity meets unimaginable power. The air in the corner spoon was a permanent greasy tapestry, woven from decades of bacon, burnt coffee, and cheap cleaning solution. For Hannah Reid, it was the smell of survival. At 23, her life was a frantic balancing act, a teetering Jenga tower of law school textbooks, crippling tuition fees, her mother's mounting medical bills, and the sheer exhausting reality of holding it all together on a waitress's wage. Each night was a blur of familiar faces and familiar orders. There was Mr. Gable, who always wanted his rye toast burnt. There were the two chatty nurses from St. Jude's, who came in after their 12-hour shift, smelling faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion, always ordering the same chocolate milkshakes. There was Ben, her fellow clears throat waiter, a lanky, perpetually worried theatre student who recited Shakespeare under his breath while polishing cutlery. They were a small, dysfunctional family, held together by shared exhaustion and the lukewarm leadership of their manager, Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a man whose spine seemed to have been surgically replaced with a stack of complimentary napkins, soft, pliable, and useless in a crisis. His primary management philosophy was to avoid confrontation with any customer who looked like they could afford a lawyer. Tonight, a Tuesday, was different. It felt charged, the air thick with an unspoken anxiety. The reason was a new face, Lily. She was the new hostess, barely 18, with wide, doe-like eyes and a shyness that was almost painful to watch. It was her third shift, and she still fumbled with the menus, her voice a fragile whisper. She was a lamb, and Hannah knew this city was full of wolves. Deep breaths, kid, Hannah had told her earlier, wiping down a sticky table. Just smile, point them to a seat, and hand them the plastic. You're not performing surgery. Lily had offered a watery, grateful smile. I just don't want to mess up. The only way you can mess up is by letting a customer walk all over you, Hannah had replied, her voice dropping slightly. This job requires a thick skin. If you don't have one, you grow one fast. It was advice born from experience. Hannah was in her second year of law school, a fact she kept mostly to herself at the diner. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her days studying tort and contract law, and her nights serving them to people who would never know the difference. Her dream was to be a prosecutor, to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. But dreams didn't pay for her mother Margaret's specialized care. Margaret Reid was a ghost of her former self, her mind being slowly stolen by early-onset Alzheimer's. She lived in a modest care facility, one that Hannah could barely afford. Every check Hannah deposited, every dollar of tip money she smoothed out at the end of the night was mentally earmarked. $50 for the pharmacy copay, $200 towards next month's facility fees, $10 for the good lotion her mother liked, the one that smelled like lavender and reminded her of the garden she used to keep. The financial pressure was a physical weight on Hannah's shoulders, a constant, dull ache that never subsided. Around 8 p.m., the bell above the door chimed, but it didn't have its usual cheerful jingle. It was a harsh, demanding sound, as if the door had been shoved open with contempt. In walked I.D. Penrose and his 2 sycophantic friends, the mood in the diner shifted instantly. The low hum of conversation faltered. Ben, who was refilling the sugar caddies, suddenly found the task intensely fascinating, his eyes fixed on his hands. Even Mr. Gable looked up from his burnt toast with a frown. Evander Penrose was not just wealthy. He was a walking personification of entitlement. The son of Conrad Penrose, a real estate and tech mogul whose name was plastered on half the skyscrapers in the city, Evander moved through the world as if he owned it, and was perpetually disappointed by its shabby condition. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, dressed in a casual blazer that cost more than Hannah's monthly rent, and he wore a smirk that seemed permanently affixed to his face. "A table," he snapped. Not at Lily, but at the space she occupied. "And make it quick. I don't want to catch pour from the air in here." His friend snickered. Lily froze, her face paling. She clutched a stack of menus to her chest like a shield. Of course, sir. Right this way." Hannah watched from behind the counter, her hand tightening around a damp rag. She'd dealt with Evander before. He came in every few months, usually late, always drunk or on his way there, treating the staff like his personal servants. Henderson's rule was simple. Give the Penrose party whatever they want on the house if necessary, and never, ever say no. Their family's corporate account was one of the restaurant's biggest catering clients. Kids got to learn sometime. Ben muttered as he passed Hannah, not meeting her eyes. "Just keep your head down. It's not our problem." Clear's throat. Hannah knew he was right. Logically, he was right. She had her mother to think about. She had tuition. She couldn't afford to be a hero. She forced herself to turn away, to focus on brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The bitter scent filling her nostrils, but she could still hear them. Evander's voice was a low, condescending drawl that carried across the room. He complained about the water-tasting municipal, sent back a perfectly good steak, claiming it was traumatized, and made loud, mocking comments about the decor. Through it all, Henderson hovered nearby, his face a mask of forced smiles and nervous perspiration. Hannah tried to block it out. She focused on her tables, on the rhythm of the work, order, deliver, clear, repeat. She thought about the case, brief she had to read by Friday, State v. Johnson, about the principles of justifiable force. She pictured her mother's face, the brief, lucid moments when she would smile and ask about school. These were the things that mattered. Evander Penrose was just a spoiled child in a man's body, a temporary annoyance. But then the annoyance escalated into something uglier. Hannah was on her way back to the kitchen when she saw Evander call Lily over to his table. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice slick with false charm. "You've been staring at me all night. I don't blame you." Lily shook her head, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson. "No, sir. I was just making sure you had everything you needed." "Oh, I don't have everything I need," I purred, leaning forward. His friends watched with predatory glee. "I don't have your number for starters." I'm not allowed to do that, sir. It's policy." "Policy?" Evander laughed, a short barking sound. "Honey, People like me are the policy. Now, be a good girl and type it into my phone." He slid his gold-plated phone across the table. Lily stood rooted to the spot, her eyes darting around the room, pleading for help. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who was studiously wiping down an already immaculate counter 10 away, his back to the scene. She looked at Ben, who was now hiding in the kitchen entrance. Her gaze finally landed on Hannah. It was a look of pure, unadulterated terror. In that moment, something inside Hannah snapped. It was the part of her that spent hours in the law library. The part that believed in right and wrong. The part that couldn't stand by and watch a bully torment someone who was defenseless. She saw not just Lily, but every person who had ever been made to feel small and powerless. She put down her tray of dirty dishes. The clatter was sharp and sudden. Every head in the diner turned. She walked towards the table, her steps measured and deliberate. The Jenga tower of her life was wobbling, and she was about to pull out the bottom block. As Hannah approached, the small universe of the diner seemed to shrink, focusing entirely on table 7. The ambient noise, the sizzle from the grill, the murmur of conversation, the clinking of cutlery, faded into a dull, distant hum. All she could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart and the slick, condescending tone of Evander Penrose's voice. "Come on, don't be shy," Evander was saying to Lily, his smirk widening as he enjoyed her discomfort. "It's just a few digits. Or are you worried your truck driver boyfriend will get jealous?" His friends roared with laughter, the sound abrasive and cruel. Lily looked like she was about to cry. Her hands were trembling, and she was visibly shrinking into herself. Mr. Henderson, seeing Hannah on a collision course with his most valuable problem, finally stirred. He skewered over, a frantic, placating smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Penrose, is there a problem? Perhaps another round of drinks for you and your friends on the house, of course." Evander waved him away with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "The problem, Hender, whatever, is that your staff is being terribly rude. This one," he said, gesturing at Lily with his fork, "is refusing a simple, friendly request." He then reached out and grabbed Lily's arm. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a grip of ownership, his fingers digging into her forearm. Lily flinched, a small gasp escaping her lips. "Please, sir, you're hurting me." That was it. That was the line. "Let her go." Hannah's voice was low, steady, and cut through the tension like a scalpel. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made everyone at the table, including Evander, turn to look at her. Evander slowly released Lily's arm, a look of amused disbelief on his face. He leaned back in his chair, eyeing Hannah up and down, as if she were a curious insect. "I'm sorry. What did you just say to me?" I said. "Let her go," Hannah repeated, stepping forward so she was standing partially in front of Lily, a protective barrier. She met his gaze without flinching. Her mind was surprisingly clear, the frantic panic replaced by a cold, sharp focus. It felt like a moot court session, except the stakes were terrifyingly real. "Sir," she began, her tone formal and devoid of emotion, "your actions towards my colleague could be legally defined as harassment. Your unwanted physical contact constitutes battery. I am asking you on behalf of the establishment to cease this behavior immediately." One of Anders' friends snorted. "Did she just say battery? Is she a cop?" "Worse." The other one drawled. "She sounds like a first-year law student who just discovered a textbook." Evander, however, wasn't laughing anymore. His amusement had curdled into irritation. He hated being challenged, especially by someone he considered utterly beneath him. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "I'm your waitress," Hannah said calmly. "And right now, I'm the person telling you that you've crossed a line. You're making the staff and other patrons uncomfortable. I need you to treat our hostess with respect." Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. His face was a blotchy red, and sweat beaded on his upper lip. "Hannah, what are you doing? Apologize to Mr. Penrose this instant." He turned to Evander, his voice trembling. "Sir, I am so sorry. She's new. She doesn't understand." "I'm not new," Hannah stated flatly, not taking her eyes off Evander. "And I understand perfectly." The challenge hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Evander's jaw tightened. The smirk was gone, replaced by a cold fury. This wasn't fun for him anymore. This was a direct assault on his ego. "Do you have any idea who my father is?" He hissed the classic ultimate trump card of the privileged. "I'm aware," Hannah replied. "It has no bearing on the situation. Your father's name doesn't give you the right to harass a young woman." The sheer audacity of her statement silenced the table. It was one thing to stand up to a rude customer. It was another to stand up to a Penrose and tell him his name meant nothing. In this city, that name meant everything. Evander slowly pushed his chair back and stood up, using his height to try and intimidate her. He was a good 6 in taller, but Hannah didn't back down. She stood her ground, her posture straight, her chin up. "You're going to regret this," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "I'm going to have your job. I'm going to call my father, and by the time he's done with this place, it'll be a crater in the ground. You'll be begging for scraps on the street. You'll never work in this city again." The threat was explicit, and for a terrifying second, the Jenga tower in Hannah's mind swayed violently. She saw an eviction notice on her apartment door. She saw the head of the care facility telling her they had to let her mother go. She saw her law school application stamped with a giant red rejected. The weight was immense, suffocating. Then she glanced at Lily, who was hiding behind her, tears silently streaming down her face, and the cold resolve returned harder than before. Some things were more important than a job. Some things were more important than fear. Hannah took a deep breath. "This is your final warning. Either you and your friends pay your bill and leave with dignity, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing and assault." "You wouldn't dare," I scoffed. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The threat of police, of an actual report, was a complication he hadn't anticipated. "Try me," Hannah said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She held his gaze for 3 long, silent seconds. Then she turned to the rest of the diner. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "Mr. Gable, I am so sorry for the disturbance. We'll be sure to comp your meal tonight." She looked at the nurses from St. Jude's. "Ladies, my apologies. We'll have 2 chocolate milkshakes ready for you to take home on the house." It was a brilliant move. She was reclaiming control of the room, re-establishing herself as the one in charge, and framing Evander as nothing more than a disruption to a normal night's service. Humiliation washed over Evander's face. He had been outmaneuvered, publicly shamed by a waitress in a cheap diner. He was used to fawning and fear, not calm, unyielding defiance. He pointed a trembling finger at Hannah. "You're finished," he spat. He threw a few hundred bills onto the table, far more than the meal was worth, and final petty display of wealth. "Keep the change, you pathetic charity case." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out, his friends scrambling to follow him like pilot fish after a shark. The door slammed shut behind them, its bell ringing with a final angry clang. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone was staring at Hannah. Lily was sobbing quietly. Ben emerged from the kitchen, his face pale with shock. Mr. Henderson rounded on Hannah, his face contorted with a mixture of terror and rage. "Are you insane?" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "Do you know what you've just done? You've just signed our death warrant. His father will ruin us. He'll ruin me." Hannah stood tall, her adrenaline starting to fade, leaving a hollow, trembling feeling in its place. "I did what was right, Mr. Henderson. He assaulted an employee." "I don't care," Henderson screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You don't get to decide what's right in my restaurant. You're fired, Reed. Get your things and get out. You are finished here. Don't even think about asking for a reference." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. The tower hadn't just wobbled. It had crashed down around her. The foundation of her entire life, her meager, hard one, stability had just been vaporized. She looked at Lily's tear-streaked, grateful face, and then at Mr. Henderson's terrified, furious one. She had done the right thing, but in that moment, it had never felt so wrong. The walk home from the corner spoon was a blur. The city lights, usually a source of comfort and ambition for Hannah, seemed to mock her. Each glowing skyscraper, a monument to a world she had just been violently ejected from. The words, "You're fired," echoed in her ears, each syllable a hammer blow against her already fragile sense of security. She let herself into her small second-floor walk-up apartment. It was sparse, furnished with second-hand finds and stacks of imposing law books. The air was still and quiet. It felt less like a home and more like a holding cell. She sank onto her lumpy sofa, the one with the spring that always dug into her back, and finally let the full weight of her actions crush her. The initial righteous anger had evaporated, replaced by the cold, creeping dread of consequence. She hadn't just lost a job. She'd lost her lifeline. That job, with its greasy air and sticky tables, was the only thing keeping her mother in the Amber Meadows care facility. It was the only thing paying her tuition installment by painful installment. It was the only thing putting food, usually leftover diner food, on her own table. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she opened her banking app. The number that stared back at her was pathetically small. After paying last month's rent and the latest bill from Amber Meadows, she had just enough to survive for maybe 3 weeks, 4 if she ate nothing but ramen. A wave of nausea washed over her. What had she done? Her first instinct was to call her mother. But what would she say? "Hi, Mum. Hope you're having a lucid day. By the way, I got fired for standing up to a rich jerk. So you might need to pack your bags." The thought was so horrific it made her want to vomit. Her mother's greatest fear was being a burden. Revealing this failure would devastate her. The next 2 days were a slow-motion descent into despair. Hannah existed in a fog of anxiety. She forced herself into a routine, applying for any and every service job she could find online. Barista, retail clerk, another waitress position at a chain restaurant in the suburbs. She polished her resume, a document that felt like a work of fiction, highlighting her conflict resolution skills and ability to perform under pressure. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Each application she sent felt like launching a paperboat into a storm. Who would hire her if Mr. Henderson gave her a bad reference? Or worse, what if the Penroses' name was so powerful that she was already blacklisted? Evander's threat, "You'll never work in this city again," played on a loop in her mind. A call from Ben on the second day did little to help. "Hannah, you okay?" he asked, his voice hushed, as if he were afraid of being overheard. "I've been better, Ben," she said, her voice flat. "Listen, Henderson is losing his mind. He's been on the phone all day, trying to call Conrad Penrose's office to apologize. He keeps muttering about lawsuits. Lily feels awful. She wanted to call you, but she's scared." "Tell her not to be," Hannah said, managing a weak smile. "Tell her it wasn't her fault." "We all know that," Ben said quietly. "What you did, it was brave. Stupid but brave." The words were meant to be a compliment, but they stung. Stupidity was a luxury she couldn't afford. The real blow came on Thursday afternoon, an email from the bursar's office at her law school. The subject line was stark: "Final notice, overdue tuition payment." Her next installment had been due last week. She had planned to pay it with the paycheck she was supposed to receive tomorrow. The email was curt and professional. If the outstanding balance of $4,000 was not paid within 10 business days, her enrollment would be suspended. She would be locked out of her classes, her student portal, her future. Hannah stared at the number. 4,000 out to 150. It might as well have been $1 million. She felt a profound sense of hopelessness settle over her, heavy and suffocating. She had fought so hard. She had worked 60-hour weeks, subsisted on caffeine and sheer willpower, sacrificing her social life, her sleep, her youth, all for a dream that was now evaporating before her eyes. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. She had been so proud of her integrity, her unwavering sense of justice. She had told I. Penrose that his father's name meant nothing. But he was right. In the real world, it meant everything. Her integrity wasn't a shield. It was a liability. It had cost her everything. That evening, a crisp, official-looking envelope was slipped under her apartment door. There was no stamp, meaning it had been delivered by hand. Her stomach twisted into a knot. This was it, a cease and desist letter. The lawsuit Evander had promised. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. But it wasn't from a law firm. The letterhead was elegant, embossed with a single stylized D. It was from Penrose Holdings, Inc. The letter itself was brief and typed on heavy, expensive cardstock. Ms. agreed. I was informed of the incident that took place at the Corner Spoon on the evening of Tuesday, August 12th. I was also informed of the subsequent termination of your employment. My personal assistant, Mr. Davis, will be visiting the diner tomorrow, Friday at 2:00. Clears throat. He would like to speak with you. Your presence is formally requested. Sincerely, Conrad Penrose. Hannah read it 3 times. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation, a summons. The language was formal, cold, and utterly terrifying. Conrad Penrose himself knew her name. He knew she'd been fired. What did he want? To fire her again, but in person this time, to offer her a pittance of hush money to make the problem go away. Fear warred with a flicker of something else. Curiosity. Why would a man like Conrad Penrose, a titan of industry, concern himself personally with a disgraced waitress from a Greasy Spoon diner? Why send his assistant? She spent a sleepless night, replaying the confrontation, analyzing every word, every action, as if it were a legal case she had to argue. She had been right legally and morally, but the law of the powerful often superseded the law of the books. The next day, at 1:45 p.m., Hannah stood across the street from the Corner Spoon. She was dressed not in her waitress uniform, but in her only interview outfit, a simple black skirt and a white blouse she'd ironed 3 times. She felt like a soldier returning to a battlefield after a devastating loss. At precisely Sakuto Samara's PM, a black sedan, a sleek and understated Audi, pulled up to the curb. It was the kind of car that didn't need to be flashy to signal its importance. A man in a perfectly tailored grey suit stepped out. He was older, with silvering hair and a calm, professional demeanour. This had to be Mr. Davies. He walked into the diner. Hannah took a deep breath, the air feeling thin and sharp in her lungs. The Jenga tower was gone, and she was standing in the rubble. Whatever was about to happen, she had to face it. Steeling her nerves, She crossed the street and pushed open the door, the bell chiming a somber, fateful note. The moment Hannah stepped inside the corner spoon, the atmosphere felt alien. Mr. the Henderson was practically bowing to the man in the grey suit, wringing his hands, and Clear's throat sweating profusely. "Mr. Davies, a pleasure. A real pleasure. Can I get you some coffee?" "A slice of our famous apple pie," Henderson gushed. Mr. Davies surveyed the diner with a neutral, appraising gaze, his expression unreadable. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Henderson. I am here to speak with Miss Hannah Reed. I was told she would be here." Henderson's face fell. "Ah, yes. The former employee. She caused a great deal of trouble, sir. A terrible misunderstanding." Just then he spotted Hannah standing by the door. A flash of anger and fear crossed his face. "Reed, you're here. Mr. Davies wants to talk to you." He said it with the tone of a man handing a prisoner over to the executioner. Hannah walked forward, her head held high, though her palms were damp. "I'm Hannah Reed." Mr. Davies turned his full attention to her. His eyes were sharp, intelligent. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was assessing a person. "Miss Reed, thank you for coming. Mr. Penrose has requested a meeting with you. A car is waiting outside to take you to him." The directness of it was disarming. There was no preamble, no threat, no offer, just a simple, non-negotiable directive. "A meeting," Hannah found her voice, though it was a bit shaky. "About what?" "Mr. Penrose prefers to discuss matters in person," Davies replied smoothly. "I can assure you that you are in no legal jeopardy." The assurance did little to calm her nerves. Mr. Henderson looked utterly bewildered. He had clearly expected Davies to arrive with a team of lawyers to sue the diner into oblivion. This quiet, personal summons was far more unnerving. Hannah thought for a moment. Her options were limited. She could refuse, run back to her apartment, and spend the next few weeks waiting for financial ruin to catch up with her. Or she could step into the unknown, face the man whose son she had humiliated, and see this through to whatever end it might have. Her mother had always told her, "Never run from a problem you didn't create." This wasn't her problem. She had simply reacted to it. "Okay," she said, her voice firmer. "Now I'll go." Mr. Davies gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He turned to Mr. Henderson. "We will be in touch regarding your catering contract at a later date, Mr. Henderson. Good day." The veiled threat in his otherwise polite tone made Henderson turn pale. As Hannah followed Mr. Davies out of the diner, she didn't look back. The black sedan was even more luxurious on the inside. The scent of real leather filled the air, and the engine was so quiet she could barely hear it. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the corner spoon behind, Hannah felt as if she were crossing a threshold into another reality. They drove not towards the gleaming Penrose Tower downtown, but towards the industrial waterfront, an area of old warehouses and private shipping terminals. The car eventually pulled up to a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire. A uniformed guard stepped out of a small security booth, checked Mr. Davies's ID, and pressed a button. The large gate slid open, revealing a pristine private helipad. In the center sat a sleek, dark blue helicopter, its blades still and silent. The stylized D was emblazed on its tail. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. A helicopter. He had sent a helicopter. The sheer, breathtaking extravagance of it was designed to intimidate, to showcase a level of power and wealth so vast it operated by its own rules. This was how gods summoned mortals. "This way, Miss Reed," Davies said, holding the car door open for her. Numbly, she walked towards the helicopter. Another man in a pilot's uniform greeted them and helped her inside. The cabin was plush with cream-colored leather seats and polished chrome accents. Davy sat opposite her and handed her a headset. "It will be a short flight," he said through the microphone, as the rotors began to spin slowly at first, then building into a deafening percussive roar that vibrated through her entire body. The ground fell away, and the city she knew, the city of gritty sidewalks and bus routes, transformed into a stunning miniature map below. They soared over the river, the skyscrapers of downtown glinting in the afternoon sun. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. They landed on the roof of a building that wasn't Penrose Tower. It was a lower but incredibly wide glass and steel structure that overlooked the park, an urban oasis. As the rotors powered down, a door to a penthouse suite slid open. And there he was. Conrad Penrose was not what she had expected. He wasn't a larger, older version of his arrogant son. He was a man in his late 60s, dressed in simple grey trousers and a cashmere sweater. He was lean with a deeply lined face, tired eyes, and a quiet intensity that was far more imposing than Eander's brashness. He stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. "M. Reed," he said, his voice a low, growly barone. He turned to face her. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to a minimalist leather armchair. Mr. Davis gave a slight bow and discreetly exited the room, closing the door behind him. They were alone. Hannah sat, her back ramrod straight. She felt woefully out of place, her cheap blouse and skirt, a stark contrast to the quiet, astronomical wealth of the room. Conrad Penrose didn't sit. He walked over to a small bar and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He handed one to her. His movements were deliberate, economical. "I've seen the security footage from the diner." He began getting straight to the point. "Every second of it. I've also had my team conduct a thorough background check on you." Hannah's blood ran cold. "A background check. I know you are a second-year law student at City University," he continued, his eyes fixed on her, "with a 3.9 GPA. I know your mother, Margaret, is at Amber Meadows. I know what her care costs, and I know that as of yesterday, you had an overdue tuition bill of $4,150. He knew everything. The level of detail was invasive, terrifying. She felt exposed, stripped bare. "What? What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He took a sip of his water and looked out the window again. "My son, I is a disappointment," he said, the words heavy with a long-suffering weariness. "I gave him every advantage, the best schools, unlimited resources, my name. I hoped to build a man of character. Instead, I seem to have built a monument to my own failures as a father. He has my ambition, but none of my discipline, my arrogance, but none of my integrity." He turned back to her, his gaze intense. "Then you come along, a waitress working for minimum wage with everything to lose. Your entire life is hanging by a thread, a single paycheck, and you were willing to burn that thread for a principle. You were willing to sacrifice it all to defend a frightened teenage girl from my son." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who say yes to me, Miss Reed. People who gravel and flatter and angle for a piece of my fortune. They are weak. They are predictable. You are not." Hannah didn't know what to say. This was not the confrontation she had braced herself for. "I've already dealt with my son," Conrad said dismissively. "He will be starting Monday in the mailroom of our subsidiary in North Dakota. His trust fund has been frozen. He will learn the value of $1 and the meaning of consequence." He then walked over and sat in the chair opposite her, leaning forward slightly. "But that doesn't solve the problem of you. You did the right thing, and you were punished for it. Your manager, Mr. Henderson, is a coward who chose to protect a lucrative account over his own employee. That is a poor business decision. He steepled his fingers. So this is my offer. Firstly, I have already purchased the corner spoon. Hannah's jaw dropped. You bought the diner. It was a trivial acquisition, he said, waving a hand. As its new owner, I am terminating Mr. Henderson's employment for cause. I am offering you your job back, along with the position of manager, at triple your previous salary. You can run the place as you see fit. Hannah was speechless. Manager of the diner, triple the salary. It was a lifeline so incredible she could hardly process it. It would solve her immediate problems. But she sensed this was not the end of his offer. It was a test. She found her voice. Mr. Penrose, thank you. That's incredibly generous. But what I want isn't to be a diner manager for the rest of my life. What I want is to finish law school. A slow smile spread across Conrad Penrose's tired face. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and it transformed him. The weariness lifted, replaced by a spark of genuine admiration. That, he said, is the answer I was hoping for. He leaned back. The diner is yours to manage or delegate as you wish. The salary stands, but that is the small part of the offer. The second part is this. Penrose Holdings will pay your law school tuition in full. We will also assume the full ongoing cost of your mother's medical care at any facility of your choosing. Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. The crushing weight that she had carried for years was suddenly, miraculously being lifted. The thought of her mother getting the absolute best care of her tuition being paid. It was a fantasy. Why? She choked out. Why would you do all this for me? Because, Miss Reed, I am a businessman, he said, his voice turning pragmatic, and I recognize a valuable asset when I see one. People with your kind of backbone are exceedingly rare. They cannot be bought, but they can be invested in. Which brings me to the final part of my offer. He looked at her, his eyes like polished steel. Upon your graduation from law school, I am offering you a position in the legal department of Penrose Holdings. It will not be a gift. It will be the most demanding job you have ever had. You will be tested every single day. You will work on billion-dollar deals and face the sharpest legal minds in the country. I will expect nothing less than the same integrity and tenacity you showed in that diner. But if you succeed, you will have a future beyond anything you could have imagined. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I am not offering you a handout, Ms. Reed. I am offering you an opportunity, an investment in your potential. The choice is yours. Hannah sat there, the roar of the helicopter, still a faint memory in her ears. A choice. A week ago, her choices had been between paying for rent or for medicine. Clear's throat. Now she was being offered the world. It was a world that came with its own dangers, its own powerful benefactor, and the lingering shadow of his son. Clear's throat. But it was a choice born not from pity, but from respect. It was a future she had earned in a single terrifying moment of doing what was right. Wiping the tears from her eyes, she stood up and met his gaze, her voice clear and strong. I accept. The months that followed were a seismic shift, a tectonic rearrangement of Hannah's entire existence. It was one thing to accept Conrad Penrose's offer in a penthouse suite overlooking the city. It was another to live in its daily reality. True to his word, his resources moved with a swift and silent efficiency that was both breathtaking and unnerving. The first tangible change was her mother. A private medical transport, discreet and professional, moved Margaret from the adequate but worn-out Amber Meadows to the prestigious Northwood Manor. When Hannah visited for the first time, she felt like she had walked onto a movie set. There was no lingering smell of antiseptic, only the faint, clean scent of lemon oil and fresh flowers. Sunlight streamed through vast conservatory windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. In a grand sitting room, a man with gentle hands played a Steinway piano, its soft melodies weaving through the peaceful atmosphere. She found her mother in a private room with a small balcony overlooking a meticulously sculpted garden. Margaret was sitting in a comfortable armchair, a soft cashmere blanket over her lap, watching the birds at a feeder. She turned as Hannah entered, and a lucid, genuine smile graced her lips, a smile Hannah hadn't seen in years. "Hannah, sweetie," she said, her voice clearer than it had been in a long time. "Look at this place. It smells like lavender here." The simple observation, a call back to a life before the illness, broke something open in Hannah. It was the crushing weight of years of worry, of rationing her mother's comfort, of fearing she could never provide enough. All of it dissolved in a single overwhelming wave of relief. She knelt by her mother's chair, taking her frail hand, and pressed it to her cheek. Tears streamed down her face, tears not of sorrow, but of profound, disbelieving gratitude. This was the first gift, and it was the most important. With her mother's well-being secured, a new kind of energy surged through Hannah. She attacked her final year of law school with a singular focus she'd never been able to afford before. The constant low-grade hum of financial terror was gone, replaced by the pure, exhilarating challenge of the work itself. She didn't abandon the corner spoon. Instead, she poured some of her newfound resources into it. The first order of business was a meeting with Ben and Lily in one of the worn-out vinyl booths. "I'm the new owner," she said, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Or rather, the new manager, and things are going to be different. She laid out her plan, a full renovation, better equipment, and most importantly, higher wages and health benefits for all staff. She offered Ben the position of on-site supervisor, doubling his pay and creating a schedule that gave him ample time for his theatre auditions. She rehired Lily, not as a hostess, but as an assistant manager in training, seeing a sharp and capable mind behind the young woman's initial shyness. Their stunned, grateful faces were a different kind of reward, a quiet affirmation that she was using her incredible luck to lift others up with her. Her graduation day was bright and clear. Sitting in her cap and gown, she looked out at the crowd and saw Ben and Lily waving wildly, their cheers cutting through the formal drone of the ceremony. She thought of her mother, watching a live stream from her sunlit room at Northwood. Hannah Reed, J.D. She had done it. Graduating 6th in her class with honors felt less like an ending and more like the true beginning. Her first day at Penrose Holdings was an exercise in controlled vertigo. She rode the private executive elevator to the 48th floor, the silent ascent a world away from her clattering walk-up. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal grey suit, the first truly new expensive piece of clothing she had ever owned, and it felt like armor. The legal department was an expanse of glass and muted tones, a hushed cathedral of corporate power. Her new boss, General Counsel Elena Albright, was a woman who radiated an intelligence as sharp and cool as the glass walls of her office. "Let's be clear, Miss Reed," Albright said, her eyes missing nothing. "You are here because Conrad Penrose sees potential in you. He is a man who plays the long game and clears throat. You are one of his strategic investments. My job is to ensure he gets a return on that investment." There was no warmth in her tone, only high expectation. "You will not be handling major litigation. You will not be advising the board. You will start with contract review in the acquisitions department. It is tedious, thankless work. You will read thousands of pages of mind-numbing boilerplate. but it is where you will learn the bones of this company. Your performance there will determine your future here. Do you understand?" "Yes, Miss Albright," Hannah said, her voice steady perfectly. She dove into the work, fueled by a relentless drive to prove she was more than just a billionaire's pet project. She worked longer hours than she ever had at the diner, fueled now by coffee and ambition instead of exhaustion and desperation. She was the first one in, the last one out, her desk lamp, a beacon in the dark, quiet office, long after everyone else had gone home. About 6 months into her tenure, she was heading to the executive lounge for a much-needed coffee. As she rounded a marble-clad corner, she saw him. Evander Penrose was pushing a squeaking mail cart. The swagger was gone, replaced by a defeated slump in his shoulders. His bespoke blazer had been swapped for a generic, ill-fitting company suit that seemed to hang on his frame. His skin was pallid under the harsh fluorescent lights, his eyes holding a dull, sullen emptiness. He was sorting inter-office memos with a mechanical listlessness, a job so profoundly menial in this environment that it was a constant public declaration of his fall from grace. He looked up, and their eyes met across the vast, polished floor. For a heartbeat, the old Evander flared in his eyes, a flash of entitled fury and raw hatred, but it was extinguished as quickly as it appeared, smothered by the heavy blanket of his new reality. What replaced it was a toxic cocktail of shame, resentment, and a grudging, bitter understanding. Hannah held his gaze. He expected to see triumph, pity, or scorn. He found none of it. Her expression was calm, neutral, the look of a colleague, simply passing another in the hall. There was no victory in her eyes, only the quiet confidence of someone who knew her own worth. That unnerved him more than any taunt could have. He was the first to break eye contact, his gaze dropping to the floor. With a jerky, humiliated motion, he turned his cart and quickly pushed it into an adjacent hallway, disappearing from view. Hannah stood there for a moment, the sleek, modern lines of the office reflecting her image. She felt no joy, no satisfaction in his downfall. She just felt closure. The power dynamic had been irrevocably inverted, not by a helicopter ride or a billionaire's whim, but by a choice, a single terrifying choice made on a Tuesday night. Her life had been rebuilt from the rubble of that decision, stronger and more brilliant than she could have ever dared to imagine. She turned, the city stretching out before her through the panoramic window, a kingdom of glass and light. It was no longer a place that could reject her. It was a place that was hers to conquer. She took a sip of her coffee and walked back to her desk. There was work to be done. Hannah's story is a powerful reminder that our character is not defined by our circumstances, but by the choices we make within them. She didn't seek out power or wealth. She sought to do what was right regardless of the cost. And in the end, that single act of integrity became the most valuable currency she possessed. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the greatest opportunities don't come from playing the game, but from having the courage to flip the board entirely. What would you have done in her situation? It's a tough question, and there's no single right answer. But stories like this make us think about our own lines in the sand. If Hannah's incredible journey from a desperate waitress to a corporate lawyer moved you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need a dose of inspiration. Clears throat. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. What story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments below.